Only the most determined foreigners come to Surigao City in the Philippines. There's one flight a day from Manila, takes about an hour and a half. But from the air, it looks almost idyllic. Long, gentle surf and endless stone beaches. But the closer you get to the ground, the edgier the scenery becomes. Things can happen here in the open that are often hidden in places like Canada. For a guy from the West with enough money, anything is possible. You can live like a king. And that's what caught Harry Doyle's imagination. A Canadian millionaire who, like some other middle-aged men, came to Surigao City looking for a wife. He saw her one day. Jane was young, eager, and willing to marry him. Harry's sister Joan wasn't surprised he found someone soon after arriving. He's not the first middle-aged man to be drawn to that part of the world looking for love.
He had been looking online for mail-order brides, and for several years, because even though Harry had lots of girlfriends, sustaining a long-term relationship proved problematic for him.
Years later, Harry would post on Facebook, "I fell in love with Jane the first time I ever saw her face. I felt the earth move under my feet," paraphrasing Carole King. Harry's circle of friends in Surigao have different versions about how he met Jane. Some say it was online, others say it was on the beach. He was more than twice her age, nearing 50 when they married. She was already pregnant with their son, Joseph. Mike Hodgkinson is a Canadian who has spent a lot of time in Surigao City. His wife is from there, and he ran in the same circles as Harry Doyle. How would you describe them as a couple?
I do think that Harry loved her. He seemed to dote on her when I was around anyways, you know, making sure she was comfortable, she wanted a drink, some food, that sort of thing.
Are white men in their 50s and 60s drawn there because they can get young women?
Yeah. I mean, I've been sitting there at the pool at the Gateway and guys in their 80s who are with girls in the early 20s. Yeah.
And do the women there expect to become brides?
That is the dream. Fortunately, in the Philippines, there's a lot of poverty. So, you know, how do you change that? You hook up with an expat. You know,
it's a ticket.
That's the ticket.
Do you remember when you first met Jane? What were your impressions?
She seemed sweet.
Subservient?
Oh, very much so. I mean, when you saw them together, she was fawning over him, doting on him, acting almost, you know, like worshiping. Very...
Seemed a little over the top.
Yes. It didn't seem authentic.
Joan and Harry grew up in Fredericton, and New Brunswick's capital city never seemed big enough for a personality as large and loud as Harry. Joan was the closest to him in a family of 4 sisters, and he was her protector. Their childhood home still stands right across the St. John River.
In that house, then, are those good memories in that house for you?
Yes,
overall?
very positive memories, yes.
Yeah. And Harry, what kind of brother was he?
He was fun-loving. He was sporty, outdoorsy.
Full of energy?
Full of energy.
Harry's constant energy and drive helped him build an impressive portfolio of real estate in the city. He owned an entire downtown block, had interest in a motel, and traded stocks for many clients. He also bought a home right beside his childhood one. He was one of the few guys in Fredericton who, more often than not, wore a dashing 3-piece suit.
Anywhere that Harry was a party. In the center of the party was the twinkle in his eyes.
If he was your friend, he was loyal.
Loyalty's hard to find in a friend. At a pub in a building Harry once owned, the friends he grew up with are tucked in a corner, still laughing about all the things Harry would goad them into doing. He sounds like the guy that most people have in their life that takes them one step further than they would naturally go themselves.
Harry always made you feel good about yourself.
Was he also sort of your dangerous friend?
Yeah, he was, because he thought he was invincible, and he was a small guy. He wasn't very big.
He sounds like was he fearless or reckless?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. He had an attitude and things like that, but you know.
He sure made you laugh.
Old Harry.
Half a world away, in the Philippines, James Musslewhite was a friend in Harry's later life, and he has very similar mixed memories of his time with the brash New Brunswicker.
I once described Harry as he was the type of man that at 1 minute you wanted to hug him, then you wanted to kiss him, then you wanted to punch him. That was just Harry.
It was in places like Mario's bar where Harry would once again act the big man in a smaller place. According to friends, he often rubbed people the wrong way, boasting and belittling. It earned him some enemies, and it seems made someone angry enough to want Harry dead. It was August 12th, 2012. That day, Harry and his family, Jane and Joseph, as well as his personal driver Jerome, arrived here, the Palma Beach Resort, for a day by the sea. Harry went for a swim, returned to this cabana, and settled in for some food and relaxation. But then, according to police, 2 men on the beach approached him. His raised voice could be heard, and then repeated gunshots. Harry Doyle was shot at close range in broad daylight, with his wife and 12-year-old son nearby.
Suddenly, one of those gunmen drew the firearms, then immediately shot the victim, Harry Doyle.
Inspector Rosemary Almazan is the detective with the Philippine National Police that investigated Harry's murder.
We started to process the crime scene. We were able to get some slugs of a caliber 22. There was no breathing anymore, and we declared him as already dead.
I got a call from my sister Anne early on a Monday morning, the Monday after he was murdered on a Sunday. And she told me that Harry had been murdered.
So when you heard that he had been murdered,
the actual reality of it happening is a huge shock. Yeah.
I bet.
To think that you could be murdered in such a heinous way, in such a beautiful environment, you know, is just something about that's a little unsettling.
Police eventually identified 2 suspects as the shooters and pursued them, but concluded that they were only one part of a broader conspiracy.
It was planned. They have knowledge what will happen to Harry, and they have the plan for that.
So who else would want Harry Doyle killed? Well, that's where this mystery on opposite sides of the world gets murkier.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just landed. Philippine Airlines welcomes you to Surigao.
It is November in 2014, more than 2 years after the brother Harry was murdered. And 2 of his Canadian sisters, Joan and Ann Doyle, have come to the scene of the crime in Surigao City in the Philippines. Harry was gunned down by 2 men at a beachfront resort, lay dying for up to 15 minutes with his wife and young son nearby. They're met at the airport by their lawyer, Alfonso Casura, who has asked them to travel across the world to testify at a trial into their brother's murder, where the 2 men charged are before a judge.
So I will be the one to tell the court about what you will be testifying, okay?
Casura is keen to have them tell a court about Harry's relationship with his Filipina wife, Jane. By the next morning, heading into court, they are determined to have their say.
I'm feeling some apprehension, but I'm more committed than ever to seek justice for our brother, Harry, and we would go to the ends of the earth for that.
It's very important for somebody to stand up for the justice for our brother's murder.
2 young men are led into the court in handcuffs. On the right is Jerome Devosian. He was Harry's former bodyguard and driver. And on the left is a man who has been identified from mugshots in an investigation led by Philippine police detective Rosemary Almazan.
When I give this picture to witnesses. Both of them identified this one. This guy was first identified by them, and this one is the second guy. The first guy who was identified was Parian, the Parian brothers.
The Parian brothers are known to police as hired hitmen. But it is only Jeffrey Parian in the court today. His brother Johnny has also been charged with murder, but remains at large. The brothers and Jerome are accused of conspiring and confederating together and mutually helping one another with intent to kill. Police allege the cost of a typical hit isn't very much at all.
I was able to talk one of the friend of Jeffrey Parian. They cost 50,000 pesos.
50,000 pesos is the equivalent of barely $1,500 Canadian. Inside the courtroom, W5 cameras were allowed to film Jerome Devosian and Jeffrey Parian seated on chairs only meters away from the Doyle sisters and in plain sight. They appear relaxed and often smile at others who have come to see them. The sisters do not engage them. But aside from Johnny Parian, there is one other suspect on file with the court who police have charged but cannot find. Someone the police allege is also a co-conspirator and have issued an arrest warrant for. The name on the arrest order is Irma Undang Doyle, known also in quotation marks as Jane Doyle. At the trial, police testified Harry's wife and driver were in an intimate relationship and co-conspired to kill him.
It was Jerome and Jane who planned it. We already completed all the evidences showing that she is the principal suspect. It's very strange about Jane and Harry Doyle. What happened to them is a strange situation. It's not always what happened here in Philippines.
The charge laid against Jane Doyle a year after Harry's murder is for parricide, a unique crime in the Philippines involving the killing of a family member. The punishment here is usually more severe than even a homicide or murder. Police declared Harry's wife of almost 13 years the prime suspect, in part because of Jane's elusiveness and lack of cooperation in the minutes and days after Harry's murder.
She was not interested to give statement regarding the suspect, the motive, because I know when you are a wife, you know the background of your husband. You know who are the enemies of your husband. You know what will be the possible motive of the killing because you are the wife. But she is not interested to give that.
But the case in court against the alleged killers is tricky. The evidence is mostly circumstantial. No murder weapon has been recovered. The two men in court have pleaded not guilty, and there's no evidence that they've told police of any link to Jane Doyle. The police base their investigation largely on eyewitness accounts from the same beachfront resort where Harry was murdered. Martla Orquina was enjoying his mother's birthday party nearby the day Harry was murdered, and this is what he told us he saw.
In here, this is where Harry was sitting. She read the newspaper, and then I noticed Jane, Jerome, and the two guys are talking over there. They came back, and when Harry noticed it, the two guys, he yelled at the two guys, "Get out of this cottage!" And all of a sudden, they shoot Harry.
Paramedics were called, but no one thought to bring Harry to a hospital 15 minutes away, even though he was still alive.
Harry was breathing heavily for about 10 to 15 minutes. But I noticed something that if that's your husband, breathing heavily, you should embrace him. But I noticed that Jane doesn't want her clothes to be stained by blood.
When I arrived at the crime scene, she was crying and sitting in the chair, cemented chair, while Harry was lying in front of her. She was calling her lawyer, the family lawyer, Attorney Pangilinan. And I heard from her telling Attorney Pangilinan that Harry Doyle is already dead, and I need your presence immediately here. And she was telling that, do you know that Harry Doyle executed another last will and testament?
So you're supposedly in shock. Your husband's just been murdered. And he's still warm and bleeding, just bled out in front of you. And you have the presence of mind to call a lawyer about a will and a doctor about flying to Canada?
Jane claimed she was pregnant and told police she couldn't identify the gunmen because they were masked. But eyewitness Orkina told police a very different story.
Their face is not covered. And actually, when they first go to the main entrance and then back again, I saw their faces. When the police came and then they had the picture gallery of them, I directly pointed out that this is the one.
Orkina had identified the Perion brothers. Then 3 friends at Mario's bar signed affidavits claiming they had seen Jane, Johnny Perion, and driver Jerome in this bar together days before Harry's murder.
Twice a month we had a regular expat meeting there.
James Musslewhite shows W5 what he told police investigators.
And on this side over here, there was Jane Doyle, their new driver, Jerome DeVision. And at the time, we didn't know who he was, but there was another person sitting here and their small son, Joseph. They were sitting here when we originally came in, and we observed them for a period no less than about 2.5 hours sitting here eating and socializing.
So police now had witnesses saying Jane met with the suspects 11 days before her husband's murder. Police say her behavior led to the charge that Jane had been key to a conspiracy to willfully, unlawfully, and feloniously attack, assault, and shoot, said Harry Doyle. Back in court in Surigao City, all of this is part of the evidence attorney Kasura has put before the judge. The Doyle sisters testified about their brother and his relationship with Jane and were relieved when it was over.
It's been a long 2 years, and to finally be able to stand up and speak and to be heard and to see that this trial is almost finished is good.
Hearing the evidence for herself, Joan is more convinced than ever that she knows the motive for her brother's murder.
What is the value of Harry's estate?
It's over $2 million, about $2.2 million, I think.
That's a fair degree of money.
Yes. And Jane is the sole beneficiary of the will dated in 2010 that was done in the Philippines.
Was there a will before that?
There was a will before that.
And were the beneficiaries different in the earlier will? Do you
Yes.
know? Who were they?
Jane, his son Stephen, and his son Joseph.
So the boys are no longer in the will, it all goes to Jane.
That's correct.
What does that make you think?
Maybe he was manipulated into that will.
This is a family photo showing Stephen, Harry's son from an earlier marriage, and Joseph, his younger son, with Jane. It was taken before Harry's will was changed to name Jane alone as his beneficiary.
So let me ask you straight out. Do you believe that Jane arranged the murder of your brother to gain access to that $2 million?
Yes, I believe that was the motive for the murder, and that Jane's the only one who had a motive, because nobody else benefited from Harry's murder whatsoever.
She sworn an affidavit here where she says, I completely deny that.
Yes, of course she's denying it.
You don't believe what she said?
I think she's a liar.
That affidavit, submitted to the New Brunswick court adjudicating Harry's estate, remains the only formal statement Jane Doyle has ever provided about her husband's murder. Her arrest warrant without bail remains outstanding and has not been acted on, because within days of her husband's murder, Jane Doyle had gathered his ashes and left Surigao City. Today, she is living somewhere in his hometown of Fredericton, still, according to police, a prime suspect in the Philippines in the murder of Harry Doyle. Harry Doyle did not die quickly after being shot in a Philippine beach resort. Eyewitness accounts say he kept breathing for several minutes while his wife Jane at first stroked his hair and then started making phone calls. Jane made $7,500 in ATM withdrawals from Harry's bank accounts to pay for his funeral services, including cremation, and 2 last-minute airline tickets to Fredericton, New Brunswick, her dead husband's hometown, and where much of his wealth resided. She arrived at Fredericton Airport 13 days after the murder, which was a complete surprise to Harry's family there, including his sister, Joan.
We found out on a Monday night when she called my sister Ann to say, could you please arrange a reading of the will tomorrow morning?
It's not surprising, though, that she would be looking for some sort of financial support.
I think it was the speed that was the problem, because she could have eventually got money to come to Canada if she had been patient.
But instead, she's here 13 days after the murder of her husband.
That's correct.
But Jane couldn't get access to all of Harry's money and property once people heard he'd been murdered. The will and his estate are embroiled in a legal dispute in New Brunswick with 5 lawyers representing various interests. W5 was able to confirm that Jane has been in Fredericton by tracking the occasional posts she makes on Facebook, but using a different name. She's seen in poses by herself and with a man she seems to have been close to. The now teenage son she had with Harry, Joseph, is seen in some of the winter posts, and another boy with long hair. We've confirmed that this is the child Jane was pregnant with when she arrived in Canada. His name is Daniel, and she claims he is Harry's 3rd legal son. Jane and the boys haven't been seen by anyone in Harry's family in years, and the RCMP in Fredericton leave her alone, even knowing she is wanted on a serious charge in the Philippines, plus a worldwide alert for her arrest. The International Police Association, Interpol, has issued a top-level red notice against Jane Doyle in October of 2015. It wants her located in Canada and arrested with a view to extradition. But Interpol alerts have no legal weight in Canada. So the RCMP tells W5 it is powerless to act here in Fredericton on that basis alone. We tried reaching the Fredericton lawyer representing Jane in her case to access Harry's will, but our written request went unanswered. So we went looking for her attorney in the Philippines. And we found Edmundo Zerda in Surigao City.
That Jane has nothing to do with the murder of her husband. She has been cast unfairly as the villain in all of this, when in fact she is really the victim. She was a victim of circumstance, actually, and was merely a pawn in the game that the couple's enemies are playing.
The possibility that Harry might have had enemies in the Philippines is something few dispute. Even the guys who would hang at Mario's bar with him, like Mike Hodgkinson.
To be blunt, as a Canadian, I was embarrassed by his behavior on multiple occasions. In a really loud voice, he yells, fairly busy bar. Hey, if I can do anything for you, I can get you little girls, I can get you cocaine, shabu, you just name it, it's yours. It's like, seriously, Harry, my wife is like 2 strides away from me. I'm here with some people I'm just kind of getting to know a little bit here. And you're yelling about underage girls and cocaine, like, shake your head a little bit.
It sounds like he might have been involved in things that would earn him enemies.
According to him, yeah.
James Musslewhite heard similar boasts from Harry.
Harry, on several occasions, got drunk in front of as many as 30 or 40 expats that are sitting at the table, raises his glass up and tells them, I'm the person to find whatever you want. I have pot, I have heroin, I have whatever the hell you want. Only problem was, later when he sobered up, he forgot what he said.
In fact, months before his death, there had been another attempt on Harry's life. He even posted a picture of the hole left behind when the bullet missed him. Police in the Philippines say they investigated other suspects, or that Harry's murder may have been a retribution crime. But Detective Almazan could find no evidence.
He has enemies, but those enemies, we conducted investigation one by one for those people. Almost 3 people involved.
Well, whether he was involved in unsavory things or not doesn't justify murder. And I don't think any of his unsavory things created huge enemies. I have compassion for everyone that Harry may have victimized, including Jane if he wasn't a very good husband to her. I still think people should be accountable for their behavior and for making unethical choices, which I think Jane made a profoundly unethical choice in conspiring to murder my brother.
With the mystery of Harry's death deepening, we decided we needed to try to find Jane Doyle in Fredericton, to hear her side of the story directly and try to get her answer to the serious charges against her. She had isolated herself in town, even using an alias in her postings online. We were finally able to locate where she lives, an apartment building that's under renovation in the city. And we were able to obtain her phone number, but every time we called it, it went directly to an answering machine.
Hello. No one is available to take your call.
So, we waited outside her building for several days, hoping for an opportunity to question her, but Jane was never seen. Her teenage son Joseph at one point left the apartment. He returned a few minutes later with a box from a donut shop and went back inside. He is not a suspect, so we kept waiting. Finally, there was an opportunity, so we moved quickly to try to pose the question she has never provided police an answer to. She came to her apartment door quickly after the knock.
Hi, I'm with CTV News. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions if I could.
I want you to talk to my lawyer. I cannot do that.
Can I ask you whether you were involved with Harry's death at all?
Don't do this in here, really. I don't have nothing to do with
Would
that.
you step right here, ma'am?
I have to talk to my lawyer.
With that claim that she had nothing to do with Harry's murder, it will be up to the judge in this beachside city to untangle the mystery of who killed Harry and whether police have the right suspects. It can be a dangerous place to search for the truth. Jane Doyle's lawyer says he's received death threats. So does the chief eyewitness, Orkina. And so does Detective Almazan, who claimed to our W5 producer that Jane phoned her from Canada one day, threatening to do whatever it took to, quote,
Vanish from her, from Earth, like that.
She threatened your life?
Yep. But the case was already finished when she threatened us.
And so Jane Doyle remains in seclusion in her Fredericton apartment with her 2 boys and left alone by Canadian police. And not too far away, Joan Doyle makes regular visits to Harry's final resting place, staying vigilant toward the one person she believes has more to answer for her brother's murder than anyone else.
I want her to return to the Philippines and face the justice system and be questioned, because she never gave a statement to the police.
Jane's silence, what does that tell you?
She's afraid to make a mistake. She's afraid that the truth will come out. I'd like her held accountable, but if not, I'll surrender to that. But in the meantime, I'm going to leave no stone unturned in seeking justice for him.